Hi, I'm Jason Gorber from thatshelf.com, here to talk about Am I Okay?
Big shelf.
So, Am I Okay is one of the films that premiered at this year's the 2022 Sundance International Film Festival. It's one of these coming of age films, but it's interesting because it's a coming of age film of a woman in her mid 30s that sort of discovers that maybe she's not quite as heterosexual as she thought she would be. It's a really charming, really lovely film, very smart script. It's directed by Notaro, who many people know, co-directed, directed it with Stephanie Allynne. I hope I'm getting that correct. Stephanie's background is she's done a bunch of L Word stuff, all kinds of other productions, but the two of them co-directed this film. It stars, again, Dakota Johnson, who has shown up in a couple films at Sundance. It's got Sonoya, Mizuno, Jermaine Fowler, Kiersey Clemens, Molly Gordon, and Sean Hayes. And one of these lovely indies. It's a Sundance staple of this kind of warm, often coming of agey film, often something that is somehow connected to maybe one major star or maybe a major co-star that you know from elsewhere, and then a whole bunch of very talented but not necessarily name brand performers. Tig Notaro shows up very briefly in a very interesting scene. Somebody who's a big fan of hammocks and hammock jokes. I hereby commend the film for that alone. But the way it plays out is actually quite sort of generous to the characters. There's a dynamic and at play between these two best friends that sort of share each other. One has much more success than the other, and we're seeing that sort of the issue of, you know, following your muse and becoming an artist. There was actually a lot of films this year of like some artist who just wanted to actually she really wanted to paint, or they really wanted to paint, but instead they were in some dead-end job. I think that's definitely a zeitgeisty thing at play, especially for these filmmakers that are just making their art because somebody said that they couldn't in the midst of this COVID nonsense or whatever. So I think that's certainly a bit of filmmakery stuff sort of playing at will. One of the things that I like about this film, and it's been discussed a couple times, is what it doesn't do. It doesn't just fall into this sort of easy dynamic. That we're allowed to have these two best friends that clearly have affection and love each other, but that's not where it comes down to. It's weirdly not the F word, and I love the F word, or what if, I guess as the Americans know it, that whole dynamic of where you don't know whether or not this person who you clearly care for, are you meant to be in a relationship or not. This is not that film, and it's great that it's not that film, because we've seen that film's been done differently, and that film doesn't need to be that film. This film really is the dynamic of two friends that are splitting apart simultaneously to a woman, Dakota, who's finding herself, who's embarrassed almost that it's taken her this long to actually figure out this part of her that sort of clicks in a particular way. There's nothing simplistic about it. It's not like a light switch went off. Things are complicated. People are complicated. When people come to this stuff, it's complicated. And because of that, it sort of plays out. Look, we've seen so many times the coming out stories where things either are full of just intense drama for obvious reasons, but nonetheless, it just becomes something that's very dark, or something that's so beautiful and so perfect and so lovely and bucolic that you just kind of fall in love with it. Looking at you, Call Me By Your Name, which I guess is sort of a coming out story, but it's a little bit more than it. Anyway, the point is that all of these stories can sort of usually fall in these kind of two tropes. And what's really nice is this film finds a really elegant middle ground, as it were. It allows us to have it doesn't allow us to have two-dimensional characters, actually three-dimensionalizes them. It actually allows us to understand their dynamics and understand as they're sort of going forward. And once again, Dakota Johnson's great. She is the heart of the film and needs to be, and absolutely elevates it with all her dynamics. You can see the sort of foibles. You feel for her as she makes things that are awkward, as she sort of falls for things that she isn't necessarily good for her own mental health. When things sort of don't go the way, it doesn't feel malicious. It just feels typical, frankly. And as it all plays out, and you sort of see all these things, you see a whole bunch of people making difficult decisions, but not wallowing them, and picking themselves up after things sort of go awry. And so, because of that, it very much feels like an adult version of this story, as opposed to the turmoil of adolescence or something that would have played as a much later middle-aged thing, which would be sort of more tense. This sort of hits the sweet spot in many ways, and I think the performances are good. I think the writing is very good. I think the direction is strong. I don't think there's anything particularly dramatic or flourishing about the whole film, and like flourishful, I guess is the better word. There's no moment you're like, oh my God, look at that camera work. It's none of that. It tells the story, and it tells the story well. And I think because of that, we sort of really get drawn into these rich characters and sort of fall. So I think I think Am I Okay is more than okay. I think it's great. It definitely has moments that truly shine, and I definitely think it's worth your time. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Thanks so much for watching. We will see you next video. Please subscribe, please like, please leave a comment. Let me know what you think, and we will see you next video. All the best. Take care.